is that it's information like those corporate directorships when I started that's sitting right there for you to go get. And you create value in it. And by the way, since most of our work has a value approaching zero, right, in this information economy, anything you can do to bring value to information will assist in your continuing to eat. By looking at that information and learning to understand it, you can create value. So in Hamilton, this is nothing I had anything to do with it. It happened while I was out of the newsroom. One of our writers, Steve Bust, did a project called Code Red, which is won awards and been nominated for a whole pile more. And what he did was he decided he wanted to look at health data and income data and geography and mash them up together to see what stories that would tell him. And so this brings me to the next part of what I talk about. You know, I have a really loud voice, and I can use it. One of the things that we don't have in most newsrooms in Canada, and certainly in every newsroom practically that isn't a national newsroom, we don't have the skill sets native. Maybe you do, and they're just not being used. But we haven't valued them and built them and created them. The skill sets that allow you to grab a data set and manipulate it, make it tell you the story. We don't even know where those data sets are generally, most of us. I'll give you some pointers on that in a minute. And this is the second point that what I wanted to point you to is something that I think we all need to start doing, and that's collaboration with the community. And that can be individuals in the community, it can be institutions in the community, it can be other media outlets. Because I think, frankly, one of our futures is going to lie in building and connecting to ecosystems of information, where we're one of the participants in it, not necessarily in competition. But because of network effects, we can all benefit by sharing audiences and sharing information if we're smart about it. So Code Red, to get back to that, Steve knew he wanted to do these things, and partly it was because of some earlier work that we had done, that I had been part of, using census data and looking at what the 2001 census. He's been thinking about the story for a long time. We did a big project saying who are we, which really looked at census data in deep detail, mapped the census data, and wrote stories about what it told us. So he saw some things in that and our work on the poverty. I ran a poverty beat before I moved off into technology, and said there's some really good nexuses here, some overlap that we haven't explored, demonstrated, or told people about. He didn't have those skills. So what he did was he went to McMaster University, and he went to social scientists there and talked to people and found two in particular who became very helpful to him. And they spent a long time in gestation, this project, getting to know each other and getting to trust each other. And then they collaborated on it, and they went and they got grants for some of this work. And the academics had access to data sets that we as journalists do not. He was able to access Health Canada data sets about mortality, about illnesses, and so on, that we could not get our hands on currently. He used another McMaster person who was an expert in mapping. And together they built this series called Code Red, which, showed, for example, that in certain neighborhoods in Hamilton, the life expectancy was the same as in places like Nairobi, largely due to poverty. It was a real eye-opener for the community, because it took information that people kind of thought about and knew, and it made it concrete. It made it very visible, the mapping and the data that they used, and then the telling of human stories once you understand what the data is telling you. So, by the way, though that project, which, I mean, he is still going around speaking about it a year and a bit later, they go to conferences, they go to academic conferences. They've done that twice now, and they're invited to a third later this year, where they prepare papers. They present papers with him as a partner on them, on the research that this did. That's a very different way of working for us as journalists. So that was a big project, right? I mean, the newsrooms get to do maybe one of those a year, unless you're the star, I guess. But we can collaborate with people in a lot smaller ways. So one of the things I'm going to urge you to do is start, if you're interested in open data and seeing how you can incorporate that into your work, which I really think we should all be doing, because one of the things is that most of our competitors for information and attention are not producing information that has as much depth to it as this kind of work. They won't be able to.
Who do you mean by competitors?
Everything from Facebook to TMZ, I mean, to gossip sites, anything that's taking people's attention and time around information consumption and information participation conversations. This is one area where we can add real value that not very many places can. So how do we do that? And I'm going to suggest that apart from doing the things you all know how to do as journalists, I mean, one of the great things about journalists is that I like to say we're always the dumbest person in the room. I don't know what that makes this room. But because we walk into our stories, our situations, not knowing things, and all the people we're dealing with all know more than we do. But the great thing about this is we walk out of the room smarter than when we walked in. And all the other people don't. They're the same. So that is one of our key skills. So on these things, if you begin exploring data and what it means, you are going to be using those skills. You can become smarter and smarter and smarter about this stuff. So you do the normal things. You go out on the net, you read David Eves, you go to the Guardian website. They have an open data blog that's amazing. It's I would say the best in the world, which isn't a huge number, but it's still amazing. And then start looking in your own community for the community that's already interested and engaged in this. The rooms you're going to walk into where everybody's smarter than you. And start building relationships. Start making those connections with those people and looking for ways to collaborate. Hi, my name.
Please stop staring at me. I'm not here.
And once you start thinking about data and its usefulness, it's really quite interesting how you start seeing the world and story possibilities differently. So yesterday I had a lunch with some of our competitors, the Open File people in Hamilton, a really, really interesting civic engagement blog called Raise the Hammer. So I asked if we could get together, because during the leaders' visits last week, we live streamed it for the very first time. We tried that, and we offered that feed to these other outfits. We said, we're going to live stream it. If you want to take the video feed, go ahead. Here's the embed code. Put it on your site, and then do whatever you want around community conversations or engagement. Just say, live feed courtesy of the Spectator, spec.com. And one of them accepted and the other refused. And the one that refused was kind of, well, we don't want to be overwhelmed and everybody think that we're an organ for the Spectator. Come on, this is how it works. So we said, let's get together and talk about how to collaborate and how to figure out what we can share, where we can share, and how we can build an online ecosystem in Hamilton. So we're having this conversation over a pho in a very noisy restaurant. With the most aggravating wait people I've ever seen. And just to give you a little example about ideas that come from data. So the open file editor was telling me about how one of her jobs is to go out into the community, to engage the community, and get them to see that they can use that site to get their stories told. And she's saying, you know what the biggest thing is I'm getting at all these community meetings? It's neighborhood cleanup. And I said, really? And she says, yeah, that's like all of these neighborhood associations, that's what they're. And then she talked about how she just moved into a new area, and she looked as she walked this, she described this route from her place to a meeting, and said, and I didn't pass a single garbage can. But there was, there was needles, there was condoms, there was, trash, there was vacant lots, describing this almost typical inner city experience, at least in Hamilton. And I said, so what are you going to do about it? She said, I don't know. I'm going to open a file on it. We'll see around clean up what we can do. And I thought, so the normal newspaper response to this, yeah, that's a good story. People are engaged in it, something they're passionate about. So the normal newspaper response would be to call up the city, to call up the neighbors, maybe the alder people, and say, so what gives? How often are you cleaning? Why is there garbage in the streets? The data perspective is, boy, I wonder if the city has a map of every garbage can. And I wonder what that map looks like when you overlay it with income. And I wonder about the street cleaners and what their routes are. And I wonder what happens when you overlay that with wards or income. I don't know what they'll say, but we're going to chase that. It's a different way of telling stories. It's a way that, I wouldn't have thought of that. It arises out of that collaboration. I'll probably turn to one of these other folks at Raise the Hammer, who is a developer, and who threw together an election map in about 20 minutes with ward boundaries and a tool that allows you to type in your postal code and find out what riding you are, and then click on it and go to see who all is running it and so on. And I know we labored 2 weeks with an outside person we hired to create something that's not as good as that. I'll probably use him, and then we'll share the product. That's the kind. I think that's one of our real futures, is finding ways to collaborate, to share our audiences, and to use other people's skills to create better, stronger stories. So I hadn't really intended to talk this long. I thought I'd go about 8 minutes, and then we'd start asking questions and sharing stories. Do I have a really good bang-up finish? No. So, maybe what I could do is see if you have any questions, and we could maybe start talking. I'd like to hear if any of you have examples of collaboration with your community or with other outfits that is taking us in new directions. I would really like to hear examples of that. And I'd like us, the association is a really nice first step in doing collaboration. I don't know how many of you were here for Emily Bell when she appeared. How many of you got to hear her? So she's a woman who really helped build the Guardian.co.uk website, which is a real model for all very large news organizations, not for small ones. But one of the things that she said that was really different for her was that in England, she's going back probably 11 years now, that there was a real community of online people, and that they were separate from the journalists, and that they shared. They got together, they talked, they networked, totally across all the normal boundaries of competitiveness in news organizations. And they figured things out together, because they were hitting the same barriers. So they'd get together and they'd bitch and complain, but they'd also come up with solutions and they'd share them in a way that made everybody better. And I think that's one of the things I'd really want to be part of here. So, if I can hear examples of what you people have anything to offer for all of us on collaboration, that would be great.
Actually,